Do you remember that music video from a few years ago? What Does the Fox Say? It's sort of an ironic hipster take on Old MacDonald. The noises of various animals are described, then the singer claims there's one animal sound no one knows. What does the fox say?
What the fox say? What the fox say?
When a friend first showed the video to my husband and me, my reaction was incredulity. What a ridiculous premise, I said. Everybody knows what noises foxes make. My friend and husband stared at me blankly. What sounds do foxes make? Well, they're canines, I responded. They bark, yip, howl. Foxes are canines? They said in unison. I was speechless. In the years since, I've trotted out this story among other friends and colleagues, seeking confirmation for my shock, only to discover that many people don't realize foxes are canines. The fact that foxes are related to dogs and wolves is as core to my perception of the world's categories as knowing that apples are fruit, that ivy is a vine, and that trucks are a type of motor vehicle. In other words, I thought it was obvious. You see, I'm more ecocentric than anthropocentric, and this often puts me off kilter with my fellow humans. I casually drop natural history references like some people drop names of celebrities they've met, but I'm not trying to impress or appear cool. This is likely self-evident, as such intention would be self-defeating. The fact is, I'm projecting, assuming others know the things I know, the way your average American assumes football matters. Foxes are canines, insects have 6 legs, mushrooms are only the reproductive organs of fungus, and the current arrangement of continents on the globe is a temporary result of ever-shifting tectonic plates, the prehistoric arrangements of which also generally explain the geographic distribution of species on Earth. This is not common knowledge? Knowing about the natural world allows me to perceive patterns everywhere I go, to make sense of my surroundings. Categories, structures, set expectations. They are an antidote to chaos and entropy, a way to find home. I relish patterns, human and non. Speech patterns, behavior patterns, knitting patterns, weather patterns, migration patterns. It's these last two I'm worried about. I work on climate change, and when I first started hearing about global warming and migration, it was in the context of plant and animal migration. But today, if you Google climate change and migration, the first several hits will be about human migration driven by climate change. When we talk about human migration, we usually mean moving from one place to another permanently, rather than travel on a seasonal basis from one place to another and back again in the course of a year. The word migrate has a broad definition. First, to move from one country, place, or locality to another. Secondly, to pass usually periodically from one region or climate to another for feeding or breeding. And thirdly, to change position or location in an organism or substance. The English language's abundance of words generally provides for unmatched specificity, but we really flubbed it with migrate. We're using one word to describe many different phenomena. Human migrations tend to be linear in nature, whereas other animals' migrations tend to be repeating patterns. This, of course, wasn't always the human condition. We used to migrate regularly. But seasonal migration is first and foremost about food, and once we invented agriculture, that pretty much shut down our wandering ways. Compare human migration, for instance, to monarch butterflies, and we look downright sedentary. Over the course of a single year and multiple generations, monarchs can travel up to 3,000 miles. Many travel to the United States from Mexico to breed because their caterpillars rely on milkweed for food, but there are many fewer than there used to be. Here in California, the population has declined precipitously in recent years. From 2017 to 2018, their numbers dropped by over 80%. Habitat loss, pesticides, and droughts exacerbated by climate change seem to be the driving causes. Then there are red knots, increasingly rare shorebirds whose populations on the other side of the Atlantic travel from Africa to Scandinavia and northern Russia, and on this side of the Atlantic from Central America to the Arctic. Climate change is also threatening these birds, as early snowmelts in the Arctic are changing the timing of insect emergence, so that red-knot chicks are hatching too late to eat their fill. As a result, they're smaller in size with shorter beaks. They're then less able to dig clams and mussels essential to their diet out of the sand in their southern wintering grounds. Because red knots are triggered to migrate not by temperature but by length of day, they're unlikely to adjust their migration schedule to align with earlier snowmelts. That's the trouble these days with seasonal things. The seasons aren't what they used to be. Patterns are becoming less reliable. Consider the blue whale, the world's largest ever creature. It breeds off the Pacific coast of Costa Rica and California, then migrates to the Pacific Northwest each spring. It spends about 4 months traveling north, a leisurely pace where it indulges at every concentration of its one and only food, krill, tiny crustaceans which in turn eat phytoplankton, single-celled plants at the ocean's surface. When it's time to breed again, blue whales race south in just 2 months. At the beginning of 2019, NOAA scientist Brianna Abrams released research indicating that blue whales' migration patterns relied on past experience. Analyzing a decade of radio tag data, Abrams showed that whales returned to the places where they'd found abundant populations of krill in years past, rather than trying to track where the krill were in the current year. In short, their migration pattern was a function of memory. Prioritizing locations where they've consistently found a lot to eat, blue whales only explore other spots if those generally reliable hunting grounds are a bust, and the need to explore elsewhere can dangerously deplete them. But in a world of warming oceans, the timing and location of previously consistent concentrations of krill aren't going to be so reliable. They already aren't. The phytoplankton will bloom at different times and in different places depending on the weather, and the krill will boom when and where the phytoplankton flourish. The old patterns will become only memories, not markers of the future. Blue whales are already endangered. They have a limited habitat, are threatened by ship strikes, as well as human-caused noise and chemical pollution. Shifting food sources could be the final straw. A changing climate is the of pattern disruption on Earth. It's been the backdrop of every mass extinction and most instances of civilization collapse. We made a mistake in branding climate change. While an accurate term, the climate is indeed changing in different ways in different parts of the world, the two words are neutral. Global warming may be even worse, with its mild connotations. And neither phrase owns up to the fact that this time, it's our fault. No meteor, no volcano, no other species to point to. Reports and articles are now migrating to a new phrase, climate crisis, a recategorization to bring the story home. Because this isn't the sort of neutral change or transition we should all be comfortable with. This is chaos. It's an end to patterns, not a making of new ones.